Welcome to South Coast Working, the voice of working people and those who continue to build the South Coast each and every day. From the docks to the mills to the classrooms to the roadways, working people add a voice and life to southeastern Massachusetts. Brought to you by the UMass Dartmouth Arnold M. Dubin Labor Education Center.
Gabriel Johnson started working at the Harvey Window Factory in the spring of 2022.
My aunt had connections there and she said, hey, it's a quick and easy place to get hired.
It didn't take long for him to notice the conditions of the workplace were unfair.
And then I quickly saw that's because there was a lot of immigrant populations, people who just needed a job to put food on the table. After like a month or two, I quickly saw that like these are horrible conditions. There's like a big culture in a lot of jobs that like if you're not in line, you will get thrown out.
So Gabe started organizing. He reached out to the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee for assistance.
I was gathering people, getting numbers, but then as soon as that was noticed, myself and my coworker that I was organizing with were quickly fired. So the momentum kind of halted there.
That didn't stop him, though. He was then put in touch with Camila Viveros, who works at the Labor Education Center at UMass Dartmouth. He got an internship with the Labor Ed Center and has continued his labor education through studying, internships, and real-life experience in the community. Gabe is 22. In addition to working at the Windows factory, Gabe also worked at Amazon, and now he's learning about how to improve working conditions through the Labor Education Center. He's just one member of a new generation of labor organizers that are on the rise, creating real change in their communities. Gen Z is the most pro-union generation, but why? And how is this new generation preparing to become changemakers in their communities? Welcome to the South Coast Working Podcast. I'm Elena Eberwine, your host for this episode. Today we're looking at community impact and the importance of an education in labor and organizing. We'll talk to former and current students, interns, and workers of the Arnold M. Dubin Labor Education Center at UMass Dartmouth to see how their work in education was able to have a larger impact on the South Coast community and beyond. Let's get into it. The Labor Ed Center has given people the tools to become the successful organizers they are today. Let's meet some of them.
So my name is Siggy Meilus. I am a longtime community and labor organizer who grew up in Massachusetts and then spent a significant amount of time in southeastern Massachusetts after attending UMass Dartmouth. I worked throughout my time as a community and labor organizer on issues regarding to public transportation and increasing and expanding public transportation, as well as fighting evictions, organizing restaurant workers, and those things kind of led me to the work that I do now. I work for Repairs of the Breach, which is a nonprofit based out of Goldsboro, North Carolina, and it is one of the two anchor organizations of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. So I currently work there as the national co-director of organizing for Repairs of the Breach and the Poor People's Campaign.
My name is Aaron Wozlovec. I am the contract coordinator and a business agent for General Teamsters Local 251. The Labor Center was where I reconnected with the labor movement after I moved up here to the Northeast and started to go to law school.
My name is Brian Pastori. I am the Deputy Director at the Community Economic Development Center of Southeastern Massachusetts, located here in New Bedford. I'm from the Boston area, but I moved down here after I left UMass, and I've been here for 18 years now. Yeah, so it's been a little while, sure.
My name is Gabriel Johnson. I'm 22 years old. I was born and raised in New Bedford, Mass, though I've moved around frequently in the South Coast area. So I've had time in Fall River, time in Wareham, time back in New Bedford, a brief stint in Florida even. So I've been around, but still managed to find my way home and remain here. I'm a third year health and society major at UMass Dartmouth. For those who don't know, that's like public health, but instead of more science, it's more social based.
I asked everyone what were some of the first skills they learned during their time at the Labor Ed Center. For Siggy, it was getting a chance to work with the community for the first time.
So I learned specifically how to build coalitions. That was pretty new to me, across community and labor. And I think that was one of the biggest takeaways of my education, how to organize within both the labor movement and everyday working community. Because up until then, I had only organized with students. So it was people that were in the same place as me at the same time. Maybe we were from different backgrounds, but in general, we were all kind of in the same age group, kind of sharing similar ideologies. So I think working with the Labor Education Center took me out of that academic bubble a bit and put me into the community.
For Aaron, who was in law school at the time and already had years of organizing experience under his belt, he learned new administrative skills.
Just setting things up so that things fell within budget, or we were on target for the goals that Kim and Camille had identified, and then carrying through and making sure that we had everything on hand, all the volunteers we needed, and more importantly that everybody was kind of reading from the same sheet of music.
I mean, like really basic stuff was kind of the first order of business. Like, how do you run a meeting, right? Like, I'm a, I don't know, 19-year-old college student, and how do you organize a meeting? How do you set up an agenda? How do you get people to report on issues they're working on and stuff like that? So that was like a really basic thing that I learned. I also learned like how to do a public presentation, and not like a 20-minute speech or a 10. It was like, how do you just get up and make a 3-sentence statement and sit down and feel confident about that? So there was a lot of really basic skills that were helped develop through the Labor Ed Center in working within kind of this group organizing stuff around the Progressive Student Alliance.
For Brian, there was some initial fear to get over. He was working on anti-Iraq war activism in 2002, organizing protests and tabling on campus, and he asked himself, why was he the activist?
You're doing anti-war activism work on campus. We're doing tabling. We're organizing people for protests in New Bedford, and building up confidence in like, no, this is the right thing, right? It's not just don't go with the flow. Like, you see what's going on, it's kind of BS, and you want to be on the right side of history. And at that point, it looked like we could stop it.
For Gabe, it was also about gaining confidence and learning by getting that hands-on experience.
Of the 5 or 6 days that I was interning, I was with a different program for each day. So one day we were out canvassing for the Massachusetts Teachers Union when they were trying to get the billionaire tax voted on. That was great. I learned how to canvass because I literally had no prior experience, and I met a bunch of cool people who gave me great insights into how to do the work well and effectively. And I think I came away with definitely the confidence to do it, and I think the skill to do it well.
The Labor Ed Center helps to connect the dots between the rich history of the labor movement and gives students an opportunity to put that learning to practice in the community. From advocating for affordable access, to public education, to fighting for better wages and benefits, the Labor Education Center increases the local capacity of students to make positive changes that make a difference in their communities.
The Labor Education Center, it's important for communities, especially students, because it offered political education, historical resources, but also like bridged a gap between academia and being actually in and rooted in community and the local labor community. So I think that's why labor education centers are so important, particularly this one. I was a young woman and a student, and I had never before experienced folks investing in my development, like meeting me where I was at as an organizer, in this like intergenerational care and support, and not only like guided me through that work, but also modeled what good organizing and leadership in the community looked like.
So I was getting a lot of background about political struggles, specifically like Black revolutionary movements in the 70s and such. And I saw how much of a factor community building and organizing was to that. And even I will say, I don't think I realized at the time in the Summer of Solidarity, that's exactly what I was gaining experience to do.
The Summer Solidarity Program gives students a direct opportunity to work with the community through a paid summer internship. The LEC also offers internships year-round for students to apply their classroom knowledge to making a difference in our communities.
Labor educators, I think, are one of the most critically undervalued positions in the labor movement. You know, folks typically think of organizers, and they forget that sometimes you have to have somebody that can, you know, connect the dots for people to explain why the Pullman strike is just as important then as today's sick leave with rail workers, and that the material conditions haven't really changed. So labor educators, I think, do a lot more to help bridge that gap, that knowledge gap, and those skills gaps as well. The LEC is particularly prominent because they take the time to go through trainings to explain things in ways that most locals might not be able to.
So I think that joining together the deep history that the Labor Education Center was able to provide, plus the skill building, plus the connection to the community, plus like a sustained interest in keeping the campaign going, like led me to feel like this was the right type of spaces that I wanted to be in. Working with the Labor Education Center was definitely a catalyst to my career. In my work of women-led struggles, women-led poor folk struggles.
From the late 1800s to today, you can see victory in victory at where workers who organize together are able to get real concessions, including, you know, weekends, 8-hour work days, minimum wage laws. And even recently, we have healthcare expansion, paid sick time in Massachusetts, a new raised minimum wage, which are all things that mean it's more money in the regular person's pocket and less money in these global elites who are able to then, you know, use that money to extract resources, destroy the planet.
For Brian, the history and skills he learned set him up for success on his career path.
I mean, I wouldn't have this job if I didn't work at the Labor Ed Center, right? Organized a conference called Tearing Down the Walls, which was a very interesting conference where we had civil rights leaders, activists, some like local hip hop artists, local and national activists showed up, or I guess local and regional, not really national, and including like Jabril Kazan, who was one of the original 4 people sat in it in North Carolina at the lunch counter, who lives in New Bedford. So we organized this big conference. We had maybe 100 people show up. We fed them. We were able to like put together a really good program, and it was a really positive event. And just like these are really hands-on skills that I've been able to use over and over again in my career, right? So it's like, okay, how do you plan an event? How do you make a roadmap to succeed, right?
By providing these tools and this type of education, the Labor Ed Center is preparing a more active future generation of labor organizers who've left an impact on the South Coast community. But what are some of the specific ways the Labor Ed Center has helped serve the community's needs? Gabe and the Labor Center teach English language classes to serve the immigrant and migrant worker population.
So I spent a lot of time in there coaching Hispanic populations, which worked for me because I'm Dominican. So that gave me the tools. I had the tools to, you know, teach more accessibly and grow bonds in community because these are people who work, live, and play here.
He also had a chance to help organize the Guatemalan Festival.
It was in a park that I spent literally a majority of my childhood in, and my best friend is Guatemalan, so I already knew, and I know growing up in New Bedford that that's a big, strong, that's a numerous community, and seeing them fully supported by people who aren't exactly them, seeing their culture celebrated and supported, and seeing community built with that is just, it makes a full difference.
Something clicked after seeing the way the event brought the community together.
I think that moment really crystallized me. It's like, this is the way movements need to be built, like from the bottom up, like connecting from the people on the ground so that you always have a supportive force to constantly organize and mobilize with together. So I think definitely that experience.
Through his work, he's learned about how best to serve a community through collective action.
And I think definitely a vital one is that nobody knows conditions better than the people going through them. So I think in serving marginalized communities, you'll find out it's like they know exactly what's going on. If they're not moving, it's because XYZ factors faltering them. So I think giving the people a vehicle to move and then letting them kind of navigate themselves and being allied with them rather than guiding is a huge step of it.
You may have learned in a previous South Coast Working episode about how Siggy helped to organize bus riders and helped fight for extended service and service on Sundays. When that project began, she was tasked with just riding the bus all day and listening to community members, to the bus riders.
What good is a job if you can't get there? What good is a public transit system if you can't afford it? And what good is a public transit system if it doesn't go where you need it to go? So those were a lot of the stories that we heard through my time organizing.
The Labor Ed Center has created new generations of leaders. Folks Gabe's age, Gen Z, are the most pro-union generation. According to the 2022 edition of the Gallup Labor Poll, only 3% of folks age 18 to 34 belong to a union, while 72% of that same age bracket approve of unions. While that 3% figure may reflect the obstacles that are in the way of unionizing efforts, as we've seen in national movements at places like Starbucks, Amazon, Chipotle, and more, the 72% figure is powerful. Why is this generation so pro-union?
So I think young folks are seeing unions as a way to combat income inequality and poor working conditions. And I think generations before us laid that foundation. I'm a millennial, and I can see like where just even my generation has fallen short over the past decade. I feel like there's an urgency to address these things that's re-emerging because there's nowhere in this country that you can afford a 2-bedroom apartment on minimum wage. Getting a college degree doesn't automatically mean financial security. I believe that all jobs should be family sustaining, community sustaining jobs. There's a reason why folks my age and younger, especially Gen Z, aren't buying houses, drowning in student debt. Generations before us, I think, definitely cared about these things and maybe even warned us of some of these things. And each generation builds upon what the last wasn't able to do. They're passing the torch on to us. So now that there are generations like mine and Gen Z, like we're coming out bolder against racism, sexism, wealth inequality, militarism, both at home and abroad, and what the future is for our climate. Workers' rights are human rights, and I think that young folks are believing that more and more.
I mean, I'm seeing people all the way, in their teens, early teens, through late 20s that are wanting to get involved and know more about the labor movement. And it's really that quest for knowledge and trying to understand the roots of the movement and where we can go from here that gives us the best outcome, I think. The diversity is probably the best I've ever seen in my entire life.
Maybe Gen Z has a better understanding of what's at stake politically.
To me, it looks like, you see the popularity of unionism in Gen Z. You see the general opinions of unions going, higher than it's ever been or been in my lifetime. And you see Starbucks organizing like crazy. You see some success with Amazon. You see some big wins right now. And I think next year we'll see some even bigger wins coming around the corner. And it's young people who are kind of understanding what's at stake around, like, we need to fight back. We need to fight back now. And I think the big hurdle soon to be will be the Supreme Court, right? Like, that's going to be kind of the big sticking point for unionism in the country, I think, with a very right-wing Supreme Court. How do you overcome that, right? Illegal strikes, they're only illegal if you lose, right? So you have that kind of thing where it's like, yeah, there's some more risk, but there's a lot of legal strikes that ended up winning big campaigns for people. So
For Gabe, it's seeing those who have gone before him and the conditions they've had to endure.
Of course, the big, prolific news leadership, people who are in the news make a difference. But I think for me personally, and what I've observed, like kids my age, we've seen what the process and the status quo has done. Like we watched our parents toil away for decades of their entire lives, and they have nothing to show for it except a broken body, a damaged soul, and debt to their name still. Like my mom, my family, they all worked incredibly hard. A lot of us still live in the projects and have not moved. whatsoever, despite being here for like a generation and a half. It's just been on blatant display our entire lives. And I think because we're coming of age and going into those same exact work environments with our peers after being told, like, no, all you got to do is get a job and work hard and you'll be good. It's like, no, this is going to kill me like it killed our parents. It needs to change for us, for them, and then for the people who are come after us. So I think that's a big factor in it.
The labor movement looks differently, too, than it once did. It's more diverse and growing more inclusive. A Center for American Progress analysis also shows that union membership helps bridge the wealth gap.
I think a shift that we're seeing is, I think for a really, really long time, the labor movement was a boys' club, and also a very white, led by a lot of men and a lot of white folks, and we see that shifting. We see more and more union leaders looking like the community, which I think is just so great for the next generation. And I think that, if you're thinking about the youth getting involved more in the labor movement, I'd say you don't have to wait to get involved. It's possible now. You don't have to wait to organize till you feel old enough, smart enough, have degrees or accolades. The best thing folks can do is support your local unions when they call for solidarity.
People are able to see themselves in this movement now rather than a few years from now. They're able to, separate out the age-old mantra of, unions were good back then. People are starting to see the present value now.
While there are a lot of reasons folks might be intimidated to get involved in the movement, here's some advice for what to do if you're looking for a place to start.
If you're on the South Coast, you can call the Labor Education Center off Union Street in New Bedford. There are a million ways that you can connect, and we like to think of it as the smorgasbord approach, because you could either do it online, you can do it in person, or you can do it on the phone, whatever works best for you. I can tell you, I had the pleasure of, helping tons of other interns just figure out how to, talk union. There's a lot of phrases that kind of stand out in the labor movement. There are things that are key, points of knowledge, and you only get that really from experience.
Labor organizing and union membership is like probably the best way to fight capitalism. So if you believe capitalism is the problem that's killing our planet, exploiting workers, hurting people in the global South, your best fight against them is through organized labor. You're able to extract concessions from companies, which means they have less resources to continue this war on, the globe, right?
I mean, yeah, that literally brings me directly back to what started it all, like my work in the window factory when I was talking to people, because these are individuals who their circumstances dictate no matter what the means, I have to be able to put food on the table for my family. I have to be able to keep our house heated. So I need money from this job. I can't afford anything that'll detract from that. So I need to be locked in and focused. And if that's the base I'm building around, like I had a lot of one-on-one conversations. It's like, yes, I understand fully what you're going through, but like there's so much being taken away from you compared to like what you're putting into it. There's potential for a lot more. There's potential for so much more. Like it doesn't have to be this 50-hour grueling work week. That's actually exactly what it was. A 50-hour work week that leaves you like drained and emptied, and then you can't even enjoy time with the family that you're working so hard for. So I think meeting a lot of people where they're at makes a world of difference.
We need resources like the Labor Education Center and these great people that have grown their skills there, because the modern workplace is changing, and our labor infrastructure needs to change with it to increase worker power after a decline over decades, and to grapple with wealth, inequality, environmental, racial, and gender injustice. As for Siggy, Brian, and Aaron, they've found success from where they fortified their organizing skills. Gabe is looking forward to the future and has some big plans.
I'm hoping to get involved in possibly every single thing that happens in New Bedford, because I've kind of rediscovered that, if you don't help to fix the place that you're from and you just leave it, everyone's going to do the same thing and then it stays destitute forever. So definitely just extending my reach to any possible opportunities.
To learn more about the Labor Ed Center and to get involved, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Head to umassd.edu/labored and give the South Coast Working Podcast a follow so you don't miss out on any future episodes.